Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining me and the Tibetan Buddhist Society of Canberra. We are going to do the short prayer to tune up our attention and intention, and most importantly, retaining this good attention intention throughout the meditation with the traditional refuge prayers and generation of altruistic intention as best as we can. And then we will do the meditation in 3 lots of 10 minutes, so about half an hour. Join your hands at the heart, and this is the last Sunday for the year 2023. Every year starts and finishes differently. I'm sure today's meditation can augment that. If you need anything to improve the year, seal the year off with a particular way to bid farewell to things and wrap up things and close the chapter, whatever, or so that you can open a new one quite easily. Therefore, it's a signal. You have a very good reason to put your both intention of the meditation for your loved ones, for your friends, and for the very troubled world. And therefore, we dedicate our meditation for a great positive outcome, positive learning from what we have encountered last 12 years, whether we have stay tuned and stay positively inspired, or whatever, we will be able to review them. And the meditation can greatly enable us to tune up our mind, and how we as individually and as a member of a community or member of a society in general and a member of the world at large can definitely make small differences should our intention be noble and far-sighted and wise. And I'm sure this meditation can greatly boost these qualities. So secure your place and try to adopt the shared discipline with everyone to sit still and have a very sincere motivation, very wise and far-sighted altruistic intention, not just for me and now and body and this life, so to speak. If there are any benefits for me and this and life and today and body, so be it. We wouldn't complain. But we are mainly looking for a long-term, lasting benefit. Often short-sightedness makes us very impatient and very irritable. But when we think of more than ourselves, more than today, more than the comfort of the body, definitely you will find extra dose of endurance, resilience, compassion, and understanding. And that's what I mean by intention. Often this modern world people always want for me now, that sort of attitude. And that usually is cause of all this short-lived enthusiasm and lots of poor reactions and overreactions and badly injured as a result of that. So how can we ensure our mind that it has a torchlight before it thinks and does and says things with the help of these meditations? So I'm sure we can do that. So please join me and everyone with the prayers, which we will screen share for those online. Others are already got the prayers before you. Join your hands at heart Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Buddha Dhamma Sangha Ajara Vidala Dhamma Bhaja Ajanda Ajara Buddha Vajra and Buddha Dhamma Sangha Ajara Vidala Dhamma Bhaja Ajanda Ajara Buddha Vajra and Buddha Dharma Sangha Ajara Vidala Dhamma Bhaja Ajanda Ajara Buddha Vajra. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion, those never. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion, those never. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion, those never. So now we do the meditation. I suggest you to focus on your technique of calm abide meditation, whether you do conventional breathing meditation or meditation, for instance, just on impermanence, or importance, loving kindness, or meditating on a form of a deity, a Buddha. So you fix your attention one-pointedly. That whole idea is you need to observe the 4S, the stillness of your, not just posture, but your attention one-pointedly. Intention should be very sincere, wholeheartedly, not becoming bored or dulled or irritated, but try to be calm and patient and enduring, sincerely doing, and with a serene attention. The attention shouldn't be scattered or unconsidered, but very considered. You decide what I'm going to do. For instance, you're going to do forward counting of qualified hand breathing, or reverse counting of qualified hand breathing, or just think of the impermanence of all things, just last 12 months, or recent weeks, just how many things are really no longer there. So why we worry about things being not right? Because nothing lasts. So just learning to stay very serene to the object and subject of your attention, and then let go. Or generating loving kindness. So whatever your subject is, you need to have serene attention on top of that. And then do that very simply. Don't make it very complicated. And if you aren't getting very far, just take a little mini break. And straighten the back. And make sure your postures are correct. Or just merely focus on your posture. Use your posture as the object of meditation. Just see how still your back is, how still your gaze of the eyes are. How rest of the body are synchronizing with that. Just merely positioning the body in the correct 7-point posture is incredible merit. So there is no shortage of subject to focus on. But I use the gong to time our session in the 3 slots and let you use these techniques invariably, but knowing to change them for the sake of improving your quality of attention and your awareness, and therefore calm abiding, so that any sign of laziness or scatteredness, even they occur, you're slowly able to stay calm and transform that into a diligent, into a mindful, into an introspective way to stay still and feel supported by everyone doing this meditation. Only if someone knew how to meditate, we know it will make a huge difference. Now we are doing that, and let's make that difference by dedicating it for the said purposes we chanted at the beginning. So thank you everyone for being there, sitting and doing meditation with everyone. This is very important part of Buddhist practice. Not only that, meditation is regarded by everyone in civil society a very healthy thing to do, not only to prevent problems but also resolve them, and resolve them very wisely and clearly in meditation. So it has many benefits. So thank you for that. Today's topic is an assumption, maybe incorrect. Why monastics are decreasing in number. And it's very important to see this assumption, this question, actually ask whether we know who is a monastic, and is it possible to live like as a monastic in the first place? So we need to know what monastic constitute. If we don't know what a monastic means, usually is a monk or a nun. So in Buddhist context, it is considered to be a most preferred status of being a practitioner as a monastic. Yeah, the expectation, social expectation, and peer pressure, religious expectation is very high for a monastic. So it's very important for us first to know what a monastic is according to Buddhism. And if they're decreasing in number, you may understand why. But they may not be decreasing, because what do you mean by decreasing is only seeing there's people with robes or less or what. That doesn't really mean that. So in some cultures, they have a periodical novitiate ceremony during which hundreds of people take the novice vows and for 10 days, and then the number just grows, exponentially. And then after 2 weeks, they're all gone home. They're no longer monastics. So if you're watching that, there's nothing really shocking about monastic number decreasing, because next year they will be increasing for 10 days, and then they all go back to their life. So some Buddhist cultures are like that, where you could not really say whether the monastics are decreasing in number or not. But this also might raise what monastic constitute, because if people think monastics are in robes only, then is that so, So I have here 12 very important Buddhist teachings, practices, what a monastic is expected to be living as. So if you look at that, then that will show you why people think monastic numbers are decreasing, because there are very fewer people in robes. Not because they are practitioner or not, so it doesn't mean much from that point of view. Generally, monastic vows in Buddhism is one of the only 3 vows. Pratimoksha vows, Bodhisattva vows, and Vajrayana vows. It's only in the Pratimoksha vows that the monastic monastic is one of the physical vows. Monastic is mainly physical vows. So it's mainly outer appearance. And of course, there are certain things he or she must do to keep that outer appearance for the sake of the appearance of the Sangha. So these 13, or 12 rather, 13 can be questioned, but these 12 points define how physical the Pratimoksha vow is. Monastic vow is. For instance, a monastic is someone who has become a monk or nun and who lives on alms food, who only lives on alms. He does not earn money or have money. Even if he has, he should have renounced house or home or family, everything, and doesn't do his shopping, doesn't allowed to have money, and he has to live on alms. So, how many people do that? How many monks are doing that? This is a question. This is one thing. Second is that such a person must always wear the 3 robes. Always wear the 3 robes. So it means must be fully robed according to the traditions. There are 3 Dharma robes, which with the lower robe and upper robe and one you sit on. So if a person is not wearing robes, of course it's not a monastic. So therefore, so that shows that it has a very physical, and he has to live on alms. So he has to be living on alms. How many monks do that? Not many do that. Certainly not in Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So do we have monastic in Tibet? Perhaps not, because they're not living on alms food. They're wearing the robes? Yes. Yes. A lot of them wearing some robes, but whether they are complete 3 or not, we don't know. So that's the first 2. The third is they mustn't eat after accepting of alms food. So they should only eat alms food and not eat after that from other sources, whatever. So basically, it's a very much a austere practice of eating only on alms food and not eating anything far from other sources. And fourth one is much higher. Never lie down. Never lie down. These are 12 dutta gunas. Dutta gunas, very important. 12 ascetic practice. So they should never lie down. So that means they should always sit up and practice. And in Tibetan Buddhism, when people do all those 3 retreats, sometimes they actually impose you on that. They make a box so that you can't sleep. You can't lie down at all. You just sit or sleep. You sit in that box. So maybe they're trying to impose so that you don't lie down at all. So how many can do that? Yeah. How many are able to do that? Some do for a short period of time, but not to lie down. Some really serious practitioners I've seen, not many. There are 1 in 1,000 who actually would be practicing so diligently and never, undo their belt, or they just sleep while sitting. So there 1 or 2 could be found. And fifth is not choosy with food. So if offered, whatever people offer, you just accept it. You can't say, I can't have that, I'm lactose intolerant, I can't have that, I'm this. So you just have to accept whatever falls into the alms bowl. And if you may not eat it, but you can't say, I can't have that. So that's, so these are all to do with behavior, how to behave, clothing, food, and sixth one is, and one who dwells at the root of the tree, shouldn't live in under cover. Always dwell under trees. Tree dweller, they call. They should live under at the foot of the tree. So this is a very ascetic practice. So shouldn't be sitting in any comfortable dwellings. So how many are doing that these days? Buddha was definitely doing all of that, and he achieved enlightenment through doing that. So he definitely did all of that. Not just one summer or during one rainy season retreat. He did their whole life. No wonder why he was the only one who got enlightened, because he was doing all the 12 dutta gunas. Dutta gunas means excellent qualities. You have to have excellent moral qualities of being able to do that. And eating only in one sit, so it means you don't get up and serve again, get another. You just eat only one sit. That's the seventh. And eighth one is like, if not tree, you have to. If there's no tree, you should still be sitting on an open space. You shouldn't go on any shelter. So basically, that's an ascetic. You're just basically homeless. Your vow is, we actually said home to homelessness. Vow of one who left home to homelessness has to be live in open space. Otherwise, we will be another shelter. So living in open space, living in open space. Basically, choosing to be homeless. Not because he can't afford, because he couldn't be. He's not seeking comfort for his body to lie down or place to shelter. He rather live open space, because open space, if not, he found a tree. And the 9th is in living in wilderness. Most probably not only in open space and under tree, but not around people, in wilderness, far in the desolate and very remote places. That's exactly how a monastic is. Monastery is considered to be some place of meditation far into the horizon, not near and nearby a city, let alone inside a city. These days, if you go to maybe in the ancient times, most Buddhist monasteries were like that, and now everybody's encroaching. So the monastery is surrounded by so many. Like 60 years ago, Bodhnath in Kathmandu was like that. It was far outskirts Kathmandu, but now it has become a city itself. So it should be in wilderness, should be in a really isolated place. Who can do that? Who's doing that? Not many. So are we talking about monastic numbers decreasing because people used to do this, but they're no longer doing this? I don't think so. And who should be living in the cemeteries? We should be living in the cemeteries. In the cemeteries, usually where all the dead bodies are strewn, maybe pieces of the remains of the human bodies are there, maybe vultures, and maybe foxes, and what wildlife is. So he should be living there. And sometimes the monastics has a requirement to go and actually deliberately live in cemeteries, and as a result, as to arouse renunciation, non-attachment, and certainty of death. So there are actually training to require. Even in Tibetan Buddhism, there are some practitioners who they have to go spend time in the cemeteries, and so as to arouse a strong sense of awareness of the death and inevitability of death and uncertainty of when that it is, and therefore prioritizing your spiritual quest and not succumb to worldly activities. And his robes should be made from discarded rags. So his robe should be made out of discarded pieces of cloth, and he just patched them together where shouldn't go have the whole piece of one piece of cloth. So these are the. So who does that? Some homeless people do that. They collect all the rags and they piece them together, and maybe the pants have patched or whatever. They do that. We don't see any monks doing that. They have a couple of pairs of robes, and they're all brand new, and so on. So this list of these things indicate how physical the vows of the monastic is, Patimoksha vows. There's no mention about intention here. No mention of what the intention of the monastic should be, because it never is. It never is. In the Patimoksha vows, there is no emphasis that you should take these vows, whether it's a novice vows or fully ordained monk vow or even lay vows, just for the benefit of others. There is no such requirement. So just as long as you live by this conduct outside, you are a monastic. You are a monastic. So actually, initially, and if not even today, people have these expectations, the monastics to be a complete renunciate. On top of that, they have to observe all the other additional vows of not killing, not stealing, not engage in any sexual activity, not telling lie, and not drinking alcohol, and all those things are just fairly normal expectations. There are lots of people who don't do any of this. But they're not monastics. There are quite a lot of people, they really don't do any of this, just by virtue of their goodness and upbringing. Not because they took Buddhist vows, but if they took Buddhist vows, of course, better on top of that. But quite a lot of decent people don't do any of these things. If you do any of these things, they're all illegal, punishable by law. So it's not a requirement for a monastic anymore. So what is the requirement for a monastic, as I mentioned, is those observing those 12 excellent conduct, outer conduct, on top of the conventional Buddhist monastic vows of what a monk should or shouldn't do. You know, lots of the things monks should or shouldn't do. It very much agrees with this. Like, say, he shouldn't be making money. He shouldn't have a title of a house or a car or anything like that. But how many will do that? You know, how many will give up their land title and their car ownership and all of that? Then there's very few people willing to do that. So when we say why are monastics, decreasing in number, it's usually this has come about in the Tibetan community in the recent, last 30 years or so. So culturally, if you look at any Buddhist culture, Buddhist culture, where the boy or girl who become monks or nuns, usually a middle boy, second son always is expected to be a monk, whether he likes or not, and the family feels it's their sort of devout duty to let one of the boy, at least the second one, to become a monk. Even the monastery will come at your door. We heard that you have a second boy. You know, now when are you going to send him to the monasteries, type of thing. So they come and recruit. So it's not so much of a choice of the candidate, but rather of the expectation of the community and devout Buddhist families. You know, they also feel that if one of the family members is a monk in the temple, they feel they are very devout members of the community or Buddhist community, and also they become really connected, and there is that social pressure of the family to give one son to the monastery as a monk. So it's whether the boy, particularly if he's a minor, knows what he's doing, whether he's giving up all of this or not, is anybody's guess. And probably less likely. He wouldn't know anything what he was. Like I became a monk at 11, 8. I had no idea what we were doing. We were probably sent because, not because the monastery was feeding us, but at least we get fed once a while, free meals. And families have very difficulty feeding, 7 children, If one of them can get fed one meal a week or a day, it's a big plus for the family budget, So if you look at the people who are becoming monks, ideally it should be monastic is someone who renounces the world, who see the suffering caused by greed, hatred, and ignorance, and who feels shocked by the human greed, hatred, ignorance, and therefore wanting to take refuge in the Triple Gem, and then also really voluntarily want to become a monastic. That would be the ideal situation, I would say. Whether the person is taught or brought up to observe all those 12 Dutta Gunas or not, it depends to the tradition. But I don't know, at least in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, that there is no one does any of this because firstly, no one begs alms, and quite a lot of them have 3 robes. That's for sure, but sleeping under a tree or in the open space in Tibet would be probably die and frozen to death if you try to sleep in the open air. So some of these the gunas are definitely kind of for a very tropical weather might be suitable. Even you have a house you wouldn't like to sleep in, you would rather go and lie in the beach, lie in empty space. So what are we talking about? So what are we talking about, therefore, is what is a monastic? Is it someone who's observing all of this? If it is, you can see why there are so few. It wouldn't be surprising if they're decreasing. If they're a stable number, you can see, wow, they're so devout. They're able to live by these vows. So I, for one, would like to say that there are actually very few monastics in the first place. What we have today is a token form of practitioners, who are holding the reign of the teachings and practices, at least to keep the tradition not die out, but otherwise how well an individual actually lives as a pure monastic. Firstly, it will be easy to understand why there are very few, because they're expected to live all this. So therefore, it never was the take of everyone and the majority, even in the old days. It never was. Maybe there were some amazing golden days that the whole 3 sons or 4 sons all became. We have some Tibetan family, all the 3 boys are monks, So, but some Buddhist country might have that. But those they may become monk, they may study, they may do a lot of study, and they may be knowledgeable. But anyone who lives with these are very, very few. You basically have to be a hermit. You basically have to be a homeless wanderer. Really be a homeless wanderer. So not a... But these days, and if not in the past, monasteries are very, very comfortable boarding schools. And who doesn't want to go there? And who doesn't want to send their sons there? Because you don't have to pay a penny to send them there. They're all educated free, they're fed free, they're clothed free, and they come up with it. And if quite a few of the Tibetan monasteries in Nepal these days monastery has 150 monks, only 6 or 7 of them are old elderly Tibetan monks. The rest are all local Nepalese boys, and 60% of them come from non-Buddhist family background. Why? Because the monastery feed them free, give them education, and they have a very comfortable place, and parents have no pressure to give them whole life. Maybe when they become 20 or maybe 18, and they can come home educated, and they don't have to stay as a monk. And in the meantime, the small population of Tibetans who have escaped in exile, they are aging, they are dying, of course, and those who are of my generation, I would say, and our children, people like me and my children, they all want to go to the West, And when they go to the West, which actually, by the way, 40% of Tibetan refugees who were in India and Nepal last 30 years ago, most of the 40% have all migrated to the West. And are they sending any of the boys to monk? No. Why? Because they have opportunity to send to decent schools, have education, have career, and help financially the family and the rest. And instead of the boy being a burden to the family, the now boy is actually a source of hope for being look after the family and the well-being of the others who are left stranded in India and Nepal. So more and more Tibetan families, however divided while the parent might be, they could not impose the pressure as they used to in the refugee camps. So there aren't anyone who willing to send their children to the monasteries. And also the boys have no need because they are not sent by parents. Because everyone previously was sent by parents, not because they want to become monks. Why? Because not that monks have to be living as an ascetic, as we mentioned in this 12 list, but they send monasteries at least were more affordable than to send the boys to boarding school, which many people can't afford because they're the refugees, So therefore, in those first 20 years of refugee, all the families send a fairly healthy number of boys to the monastery, and they have become, and quite a few of them has, of course, may not be able to live a fully like a monastic as observing all the ascetic vows we mentioned, but nevertheless, they studied, they educated, some of them become good teachers and so on. But a lot of them themselves has disrobed. Why? Because once they migrate to the West, they can't just take a begging bowl alms and go in the street and to be fed. Not that they did practice that in India anyway, so they have least reason to be able to practice that. In the West, it's illegal anyway to go begging unless you go to a designated spot. with the professional homeless people, you have to go with that. So who wanted to do that? Nobody wanted to do that. Society shuns and looks down on and people think being a monk who expect to be fed and do nothing, and it's a bit of a burden. So whole society is, I'm talking about Tibetan, why monastic are decreasing in Tibetan Buddhism in number, yeah? Another reason, that's one big reason, yeah? That's one big reason why, because families are more educated, they all have jobs, and they want the son or daughter to send to school to have the same better education and so on, and none of them want to go to the monasteries to do any of that. And secondly, in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they had a huge influx of Tibetans, families sending their young boys from Tibet by hook or crook. Not that they can easily travel to India and Nepal, but they had, nevertheless, thousands came. You wouldn't believe. Thousands came, and the number of monastic populations just increased. Some of the monasteries increased, like in South India. Some of the monasteries, like Sarah or Draper Ganden, their monastic population increased then more than they used to have in all Tibet. And these monasteries are so comfortable. They are so well financed by our recent devotees from various parts of the world, and because people really love Dharma and so on. So support for the monasteries have been so good, and the influx of the boys from Tibet was so huge. They had to, not only the boys went to monasteries, but girls and others who were sent to Tibetan children's village, and Tibetan children's have to open upper TCV, lower TCB, everywhere. They have TCVs everywhere, Why? There's so many influx. Now, many of those schools are empty. Why? From the early 2000 onwards, now up to now, that's 24 years, there is no Tibetan children coming from Tibet. So, on one side, you have all schools are getting empty. Why? There's no enrollment. Why? Those Tibetans who were in India for the last 40 years, they have migrated. 40% of them have all migrated to the West, and they are busy sending their kids to school wherever their country is. And so therefore there is no recruitment happening from the Tibetans in India, and no influx of new children coming from India, from Tibet, and the monasteries are in fact, now in those 70s, particularly like my time in the 70s, we have many people want to send their boys to the monastery, but there was no monasteries. There was no building. We could have actually stayed open outdoor and be a very good monks, but they try very hard to put roofs over their head and food, a couple of meals in a day or whatever. So maybe they did all the wrong things. They should have made us to be really, really poorly fed and not roofed. They should have kept us a monastic, but that tradition never existed. It says in the teaching that they should be living like that, but it never survived. Never survived. No wonder why Buddhism itself disappeared from India. Some people blame Muslim invasion, but I don't think so. There was a number of reasons. One of that was being a monastic was too hard. And that's why even devout Buddhists like Thailand, I don't know about Sri Lanka, Thailand has changed the system to make the monasticism just temporary. That's why they have novice ceremony, or people become monks and nuns for just 10 days, 5 weeks, or whatever it is, whereas to people to stay as a monk for many years is very, very few. Why? Because of the very reason that even devout Buddhist countries, where there's no shortage of supporting the temple or feeding the monks of one meal or whatever, there's no such shortage, but those who are able to keep the monastic vows live is very, very slim. If you look at the monastic population in those countries, they're not even 5%. Even those who are 5% monastic, majority might be temporary monastics. Yeah. So countries like where there is the temporary monastic, but expected to be monastic for whole life, unless they deliberately disrobe and whatever, even among them, the percentage is probably maybe in Tibet once it was maybe like 10%. In the old days, maybe it was 10%, but considered very high. But 10% is still not very high. If you look at the whole population, only 10%. And so, therefore, firstly, good are few. And if there are few, it's very easy to get fewer. So therefore, it's not discouraging to see the decreasing in number. Doesn't mean they're decreasing in quality, though. We have many amazing practitioners who may not be living like any of these 12 Dutta Gunas, but nevertheless are really holding the reign of the Dharma through their, I would say, knowledge, discipline, and goodness. They may have land title, they may have cars, they may have homes, but nevertheless their whole effort and energy is directed through the upliftment of Dharma and propagation of the teachings. So that's why I would like to say that when Buddhism came to Tibet, that's quite late, 8th century. 8th century is 1,300 years after Buddha. That's a long time. But it has people like Shantarakshita, who was instrumental in introducing monasticism in Tibet, foresaw that same cannot continue in the new land and in a new time. Therefore, he, along with Padmasambhava and King Trisong Detsen, decided to create two forms of monastics: household monastics and fully ordained monastics. So household monastics are, ever since they introduced that, I think that prevented Tibetan Buddhism from dying. I can see. But if those Tibetan Buddhist schools, traditions that emphasize monasticism, they're basically holding because the rest of those who's a householder monastics Buddhists are very, very strong. Because of that, their support for the Dharma is never going to wane. Why? Because household monastic tradition, like those householder lamas, monks, don't call them monks because householder, I would call practitioners. They are not monks, but they nevertheless are practitioners. Even monks are not observing many of these 12 Dhatu gunas. So how should householders could be also? So basically, if you look at how the monastics are living, how the householders are living, only difference is householders have family, and the monastics don't have families. That's the only difference. Otherwise, what the pigtailed, they call pigtailed householder practitioners, what they do is exactly they train, they study, they do retreat, they practice, they study just as much. That's their full time. So they don't have day job. That's their job is just as much as full time. And there's no danger of them giving up that after 10 years because they are no longer monks or something like that. Whereas if the pressure for the monks is that if the monastics break one of his 5 principal vows, then he stopped being a monk. He cannot do whatever. So therefore, the whole pressure and expectation for the monastic is so high. And while there is a perception of saying, oh, these are pure monastics, the whole perception is these are pure monastics because they're monks, but actual work, heavy lifting is done more by the householder monastics, because they never have failed. Nobody's losing any member. Nobody losing any member from the practitioners. Whereas anyone in the so-called monastics, if one of the fairly learned monk and become disrobed, and it's become like a shame. It's it's a big failure for him, his family, and his next life, and to the whole monastery. So the big shame that they associate with not being a pure monk is so heavy a burden, and nobody wanted to, sort of take that blame, Whereas householder monastic side, if you just have family, you just have more time to practice Dharma, that's becoming more and more strong in Tibetan Buddhism. They started that in the 9th century to prevent the total, I would say, disappearance of Buddhism. But India, they emphasized the former. They emphasized the pure monastic vow. Like the Hindus are quite strict too, Hindu priests, if you look at the Hindu priests, they are observing most of this, what we mentioned. They don't sleep in homes. They always sleep under trees. They really are more monastic, more ascetic practitioner than Buddhists are. The Buddhist monastic have become given the status of royalty treatment, not because they want it, but because of the king, royal patronage of Dharma that happened in Tibet or in China. In China, it is said why the monks begging stopped, because the Chinese emperor said, look, I don't want you to go beg alms in the street. It brings me shame. So the Chinese just totally elevated the monastic's role into a kind of a royalty state, that just as much as royal will be treated, they always treat the monastic that level, and as a result of that, the whole Dhutaguna practices never fostered in countries like Tibet or Mongolia or other countries like China, and less still in Japan. So what you see, small attempt, but to the try to be as closely as adhering to these 12 Dhutagunas, ascetic practices, are supposedly observed in Theravada Buddhism. If you look at it, you can see there's a lot more alms. Most monks are always living on alms, for instance. Even if they can, they don't have to. But they're not meant to cook. They're not meant to do shopping. So they have to go back in alms. So that you can see. But they are still living in very comfortable temples. They're not cemeteries. They're not open air. They're not tree. So, and so on. They still have fridges. They still have other foods. So it's not exactly able to observe all the things. So if you go by that, you can see no wonder why there is a decreasing number of monastics. Why? Because it's less and less practical to do. And but there have been incredible individual practitioners, like Milarepa in Tibet, was not even a monastic. He didn't even shave his hair. She never. But the day he heard the Dharma, and for the right reason, he just lived completely. Not because these 13 to 12 lists he was taught to, but he took up all of that. Yeah. But he lived in caves. I don't know whether he should be blamed for that or not. But pretty desolate. There was no comfort there. You try there, staying there one night, you can tell whether you want to be whether you prefer open air. He wanted to be sort of confined from everywhere, retreating from everywhere. He definitely lived more devotedly than any monastic would say. So we are not saying that decreasing a number of monastic is not necessarily a sign of death of the Dharma, you know. But some people say in an old classical way that for the existence of Dharma you must have 4 members of the Sangha. Of these, the 2 are monastics. 2 have to be monastic. Fully ordained monk, fully ordained nun, and then then devoted lay upasaka and lay upasika. So lay devoted lay upasaka, male and female, exists everywhere. You know, wherever there is these 2 strong, the Dharma is still strong because it got the 2 legs of the table still very strong. You know, if you rely totally on the Sangha only, and as lay people are not good, and that's exactly when the Dharma will disappear. I think that's what happened in India. Yeah. So my prediction is Tibetan Buddhism, because of its foresight by likes of Shantarakshita, Padmasambhava, King Tizon, they allow these 2. So we can see among the Buddhist Tibetan Buddhist schools, Nyingma and Kagyu, these 2 lineages basically do not differ a lot. They have so many householder lamas. They are robes, but they still have families. But their work is unquestionably 100% Dharma. And they devote so much to train or educate and sponsor, and whether it's philosophical study of the monks or others, 50 of them going to retreat, they're just doing that incredibly well. And they do not select them being necessarily a monastic. They are householders, there's man, there's woman, a monk, a nun, anyone can go and do the retreats. There's not a big sort of emphasis to be a monk or nun, particularly. They welcome everyone. So because of that, you can see that all the Himalayan region are basically followers of these 2 traditions. And there you can see the monasteries in the remote areas. They still want to prefer to become a monk. There is no doubt about that. They don't see the monastic way is not the way to go. They still would aspire to be a monastic, but still majority are choosing to be householder, I would say monastics, practitioners. As a result of that, and their respect for the others, whether of their same tradition or other tradition who are monastic, respect is as great as you would expect from anybody. So therefore, the even if the numbers of sanghas appear to be decreasing, but quality of the good practitioners are still there. Why? Because the lay Sangha, upasakas, upasikas, their faith, and a lot of them are former monks, former nuns, and their heart and soul is in the Dharma. And because they didn't discriminate, it doesn't come with the shame that you have been a monk and you can't. Now they can join. Quite a lot of monastics, ex-monastics are becoming Nyingmas and Kagyus. Because they don't discriminate. They will, well, Asakyas are not so much of a this or that, but in Gelugpa tradition, it's almost like they think if it's a lay, you are just like a no chance. They treat you with almost like a unmentioned contempt. If a lay person, you don't get a chance. They have a very disregard of lay people, except benefactors. So it's very much like in Theravada Buddhism. If a lay person shouldn't even eat until the monks finish eating, and that sort of thing. So they really have this very strong caste system. If this kind of system is strong, you can see the number of monastic will only be decreased. Particularly when the families are exposing more to the modern things, materialism, comfort, gadgets, all the things are readily, easily. They never had those things, let alone renounce them. If they can get it, they really want to get them, So they are not renunciate. They haven't renounced anything because they never had those things. If they can put their hands on it, they would use them. They would like to have a comfortable bed. They would like to have a good phone or good computer or all of those things. And they are necessary because otherwise you wouldn't function in this world, So in this digital age and technological age, it would be more and more challenging how well the reason why the monastic number decreasing is not a bad sign. It doesn't have to be a bad sign. It doesn't have to be a sign, there's so few people becoming monasteries. If the knowledge, those who know the Dharma, those who practice the Dharma are decreasing, then of course we have a good reason to be concerned. But that's not necessarily have to be the case. Nowadays, the knowledge, the mode of education and dispensing a knowledge of the Dharma doesn't have to be restricted as it was in the old days. So why are the monastics numbers decreasing in number? As I mentioned, in Tibetan case, I'm not saying that is the case in Theravada because I haven't seen to say that, no. But definitely we know there are very, very few monastics in Japan. Basically, Japan got very few monastics. Around 7th century, they already made all the monastic as householders. The Japanese priests are cleanly shaven, wear immaculate robes when they have to perform the ceremony. Otherwise, they're just householders. Why? Because their job, that's a uniform. They just wear the uniform for the job, but otherwise they have totally day-to-day job. It might be running the temple, might be a school, might be a school or might be a librarian or whatever a day-to-day job might be. But the person actually does that. But yet, Japanese culture, you can't say they are not Buddhists. The people completely change. You can see all Japanese people are somewhat softened by Dharma from generational influence. You can see the overall culture of people are still very much tamed or calmed, pacified, if you like, manicured by Dharma. Maybe manicure is not the right word. Externally, behavior is actually very, 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 very incredible. Like the crime level they have in Japan is so low, but suicide is so high and opposite. So you can see the actual overall conduct of the Dharma to the overall Japanese psyche through Buddhism, even without pure monasticism, is still as strong as you can imagine. What a whole social consciousness has been changed by Dharma in certain cultures. You can see that. Whereas Tibetan Buddhism, in Tibet, if the number of monastic decreasing, I'm not surprised. Why? Because the government authorities there, while have given religious freedom, argue that boys who want to become monks should only do so after they finish high school. Until then, they don't allow young boys to go to the monasteries just because parent wants them or boy wants them. No, they must do the normal schooling first. And only when they finish high school, age 18, you must be 18 or above to make a decision. And then government supports. To be fair to the communist regime, I must say, they are not restricting from people becoming monk. They're restricting becoming monk too early as a young boy, because they say this boy cannot decide. Okay, he doesn't know what constitutes of being a monk. Give him a basic education first, and then let him decide himself. So that may be seen as a lack of religious freedom from one point of view, but nevertheless, a government authority has made it, and those. So as a result of that, the consequences that there are so few people becoming monk at a young age, and so if people are not becoming monk at a young age, they will not be all of a sudden become monk when they already a high school graduate because they already enticed. They want to do a career, they want to do this and that, and unless they have seen so much sufferings of the life and have some kind of natural instinct to become a monk and tell the parents and tell the authority, I finished high school, I want to become monk, maybe that will definitely discourage many people become monk. Not that is the intention of the authorities of the family, but nevertheless, because if you have such a ruling from the government, of course it will naturally. If you look at the monasteries in Nepal and India, majority of them are just 5-year-old to 16-year-old. And those above 16 to 40, only half a dozen. Between 5 to, like one monastery we were there, that they have like 95 boys. All those 95 boys from 5 till 16. Half a dozen are teachers. So those are, because these families and people who are sending the boys are either too poor, that's it. That either too poor, mostly because they're poor, or too devout. Some are families very devout. They really want to send the boy. Boy also might be very interested in going to the monastery. So there are some people like that right from baby. So these two reasons makes them easy to send to the monastery, and they don't have to send to school because the monastery teaches all the basics, and they feed you, they clothe you, they give you education. Of course, who doesn't want to send there? But those boys, exactly opposite. When they turn 18, leave the monasteries. Why? Because they have basic education. Parents are not Buddhists, and they couldn't believe. They are conversant in Tibetan and language, and they know Buddhism, but they go home and they're a stranger at the home. The ex-Hindus or Hindus, they are not Buddhists, but the parents doesn't restrict them from carrying on monk. But quite a lot of parents had no intention to let him stay as monk. They want him to come home, educated, help the family. So the exact opposite. So here in exile, we have a lot of young, even though not enough Tibetans, but all the Himalayan range countries, boys are there. They're all speaking Nepalese. You go to monasteries, there's hardly anybody speaking Tibetan. Why? Because they're not Tibetans. they're all Nepalese. Of course they are Nepalese. They will be speaking Nepalese. Incredible, yeah. And yet, when they speak in Tibetan, they know the Dharma very well. They know the rituals very well. And when they mature by age of 18, then they will be given freedom, whether to stay as a monk or go home. The monastery is doing that. Why? By doing that, at least you're recruiting all these people, young generation, with Dharma. So even should they not continue as a monk, which majority of them don't, I'm told, particularly when they turn 18, of course they have very poor families to help. And now the boys can actually go overseas, or they have some basic education. They can go overseas, or they can even get a good job or do some trading, and without family having to, feed them and clothe them all those difficult years of a teenager. No wonder why the monastic population is decreasing in number, because on one end, there's a lot of youngs, all of a sudden the bottleneck after age of 18, and then there's no one. They all go. And monastery can't stop, monastery can't stop those boys leaving, because they're culturally Nepalese or Indians, or people from Arunachal Pradesh, Ladakh, or Manang, or Mustang, or Sherpas, or whatever they are, and some of them are family are also Buddhists, so they really prefer if the boy did stay as a monk. But some families so poor, they will have to get the boy to come home and help the family. And to do that, they have to go and do a menial normal job, and they can't do. So therefore, you can see that the monastic population will rise on one age group and drop another age group. So what have we? We have got a huge gap. You have either very, very elderly monks who are really struggling, have no one to look after them, in the 80s and 70s, have very little health care, no health care basically, and then you have a good half a dozen able monks, maybe in their 40s. If they are the very hard lifters, they have to do all the educating, they have to do the administration, and all the young boys coming, and after 18 they leave. So that's the reason why the monastic, the number of monastics or appearance of the monastics are decreasing because of these dynamic causes and conditions. And this is nothing to do with the it's a lot to do with the economic, social, cultural, and political situations. For Tibetans, after they moved to the West, which I'm told 40% has moved to the West, you wouldn't believe that. Cities in America, in North Canada, there are tens of thousands of Tibetans living there, and who previously used to live in India and Nepal, and others who escaped in the 80s from Tibet, and so they all have their children. They're not sending any of them. They are sending their boys for a summer camp to India to learn Tibetan, and all of a sudden they realize they're not learning enough Tibetan, and otherwise none of them are interested to go to the monastery. Why? They have to go and mix with the people from the orphan type of groups. Most of the boys are orphans, and all families that's a very poor, underprivileged, very poor families, and who couldn't feed. So because of this, but the number of lay people who are still believing the Dharma and supporting the monasteries and the overall teaching is not decreasing; it's getting stronger. So maybe the number of ordained Sangha appears to be decreasing, but actual strength of the community is still strong and stronger, because you wouldn't believe the ratio of people attending the teachings. Recently, I came from Nepal, where they give Lamde teaching for 2 months. Here, out of 4,000. Only 20% of them are monastics. The rest are all lay people. Of course, many foreigners, even local people. It's a majority of all lay people. Why? Because that is the ratio. That is the population ratio of the population. Whereas in the 70s. And 81, particularly when I remember, in Lamde, big Lamde in Purwala, their exact ratio was exactly opposite. 80% was monks, monastics, and 20% was lay people. When you look at this 80-20 reversal of it, now out of the 20% of the monks, of course, some are so young they don't even know they're monastic. They're just there, and only maybe 10% of them are very very well grown up, educated, very mature monks and so on. But if you look at the lay community, that's like 80%. Out of lay community, I don't know how many are illiterate, but there are quite a lot of literate lay people who are now attending the teachings. So the ratio is completely reverse. So now we have more lay people who are following Dharma, as devotees, and who are just as keen as one could have been, and the number of monastics, if you look at the ratio, was only like 20-25%. So, of course, this completely reveals and confirms why the monastic population is decreasing, because lay practitioners are not decreasing, but increasing. So they're no longer onlookers. They're not just mere devotees. They're not just supporters and breadwinners for the monk. They actually want to practice. They really wanted to roll the sleeves, and they wanted to learn how to do the sadhanas. They wanted to learn how to do the mandala offerings and do those practices. But in the 80s, when I remember, there weren't any lay people who were into that, who were there just for whatever the reason were there. So what we're talking about is Tibetan Buddhism is, of course, in a very dynamic time because of the popularity of His Holiness Dalai Lama, and because people have amazing expectation of what Buddhist teachings in general, and that is kept in Tibet can help. So therefore, it's a devotees and audience in non-Tibetan communities so big because it's going to increase, and the more they're increasing. But while the what do you call the ordained members of the Tibetan themselves are changing. Now the monasteries have more problem of not getting anybody admitting into the monasteries. Before they have problem of not having enough beds. Now they have so many empty beds. And some schools are closed. The lower TCV school in Dharamsala, Tibetan Children's Village, lower TCV is big establishment closed. They only got 6 Tibetan children. Why? Because there's no influx. Everybody has moved to the West. And so if people are migrating like they do, of course, if the people move, the school has to move. And the school do not get occupied. So these are supposedly children's village for Tibetans, but now only locals are starting to take up the positions. And of course, it's good to be used by somebody then leaving it vacant. But they couldn't realize what a big change of people's movement has changed the whole dynamic of population. And of course, that will reflect in the monastic population, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's not just the monastic populations are decreasing. The whole school is becoming empty. So it's not the quality or quantity of monastics are decreasing, but whole demography of social movement of that, and whether it's economy, whether it's religious, whether it's culture or political, all have mutual kind of effect, So therefore, I don't think we should think the decreasing number of ordained Sangha is no sign of weakening of the Dharma. It might exactly opposite. Maybe we should have quality monks and nuns rather than just saying, oh, we have 3,000 monks, then think that you are greater than the next door who's only got 2,000. If they are only talking about competing number, we're not talking about soldiers, we're not talking about war or anything like that. So what's the point of having so many heads? Aren't we trying to realize headlessness? Rather than try to count the heads and think the greater number of monastics necessarily greater, because they now they run out of. So they have some of the monasteries, not some, all of the monasteries in India are sending monks in the villages in the Himalayan remote villages try to almost recruit, would be wrong word, almost solicit the parents to send their boys to the monastery. They'll give free education, this school, this school, this school. And they're doing that all the time. And I heard they actually even run into trouble of human trafficking because because some of the boys complained, whatever, and then parents rebel, and they are making noise saying these boys should never be allowed to take. They're minors, they're not minors, and you're not allowed to take minors without parental consent. And maybe the parent, of course, all consented because they couldn't afford to keep them in the villages, and they were promised to have a good school, and a lot of them do. You wouldn't believe the actual return consequences that nowadays there's so many learned Sherpa, Manangi, Yolmo, Mustang, and all that Arunachal monks who are well conversant in Dharma and teach them eloquent in Nepalese and Hindi and in their languages, and they are becoming really celebrated teachers in their community. Now, so it wouldn't be fair to say that most of them have left age 18. No, many of them have stayed and did their Lopon training, then 3-year retreat, and they become really great teachers. Now the whole dynamic of Buddhism is revived in Himalayan region like no other. So we mustn't think that while some number may be decreasing, but there's a huge population that we didn't lose, actually have stayed and become the leaders in the monastery now. So like people in their 50s are a result of those boys they recruited in the 70s. So there is not at all sort of same consequence, no, totally different consequences. During those generations, monks have stayed. Half a dozen of them, I've seen them, all classmates. They're all in their 30s, late 30s. They have become incredibly learned, and they can teach in their language. They are the main administrators of monasteries. So they're not going to leave because they know the Dharma well enough to not to desert the monastery or their lives as such. So you can see you can raise a lot of people, but there will be some you will win, some you will lose. But overall, the recruitment process of the Tibetan monasteries that they have practiced in the past have really been rewarded with so many learned Nepalese. We even had the one of the Ganden Tripa was a Ladakhi. He just passed away last year. So this would never happen in all Tibet. so quite a lot of those if we have these lamas from those areas, they got to become as leaders. So that shows that it's completely changing. Even one of the senior abbot in Sera, he's actually, because Sarah got Sarah J, Sarah May, I think Sarah J, maybe I'm J. This abbot is from Arunachal Pradesh. He's one of those recruits from little boys from Arunachal Pradesh. Now he's an abbot of Sarah J. So therefore their effort to recruit those boys haven't completely gone astray. Many of them have become really to study for so many years and become very learned and good and disciplined, whatnot. To become abbot of Sarah J is no ordinary thing, Out of several thousand, 3,000 monks to become abbot, and one from Arunachal Pradesh. What happened to the Tibetans? It doesn't have to be Tibetan, by the way. So he's just like a homegrown, abbot that could not have been done even better in Tibet, So you can see the whole dynamism of the Tibetan Buddhism and its acculturation in the foreign land in India has done very, very well. So we shouldn't be sad if there is a decreasing number of monastics on one level, because overall, you go to each of the monasteries, they're doing very, very well. All the great teachers are giving guidance, benefactors, very many devotee lay people's support is incredible. You wouldn't believe how, that shows there is no sign of decreasing of Dharma being supported or practiced or taught. It's not. Sure, there will be, everything changes, so number will be increased, number will be decreased. Some monasteries are increasing, others are decreasing. There is a certain karmic pattern happening in that very monastery, Incredible, yeah. So that is quite natural thing. So therefore, there was a big concern among Tibetans in India about this decreasing number of entrants in the monastery and in school. They should understand why, because all of those above facts tells why. Firstly, it's very difficult to be a monastic, if there are many. There are many who are monks and nuns. How many of them are actual ascetic practitioners? They have to judge themselves. Nobody can judge, It's our individual, but merely because you're not monastic doesn't mean you can't practice the Dharma. That's why Buddha gave four potentials, four positions: layman, laywoman, ordained monk, ordained nun. I mean, you don't even have to ordain as a layman. You already are devotee practitioner. You have refuge the triple joy. You do your bit. I'm sure we'll hold this side of the tent up, and if the other pulling that side of the tent up, it wouldn't collapse. So therefore, I would like to not sort of see this question as a why, what's wrong, but this is, of course, you can understand why, because these human beings are doing the changes themselves, migrating and this and that, and then now they no longer wanted to send the boy to school because the parents want him to become a breadwinner. Previously, they thought they don't want to feed any bread to him. So they send to the monastery. Of course, we are doing that. Of course, monastery population will be affected by that. There is no magic creation from the monasteries. They just are waiting to see the consequence of social dynamics. So from this point of view, it's but I would like to say the actual strength of Dharma is so much greater now, because knowledge dispensation of the Dharma is much easier than we used to be in the 70s and 80s. Nowadays, they have much easier access to learn and study the Dharma, that you have to rely on one book that someone wouldn't lend to you, that kind of problem, Nowadays, the books could be published, and could be published even in what they call e-book. E-book, gosh, e-book. You can have your e-book e-booked. You don't have to even spend one piece of paper to publish. So we're living in a totally different time. We can learn the Dharma through Zoom, through all these things, and you don't have to travel any mile. And so all of these things we should not worry about. But in the West, you can see, in the West, the Dharma, it will take a long time. It has taken a long time, every country, for the Dharma to be fully established. Because West is so materially advanced and technology advanced, it actually is the right place for people to renounce. Because you got so much for so little. People have almost become sick of the things we have and lacking the true Dharma. In the West, we are a very ripe place to renounce, go from home to homelessness, because you have a good education, good degree, and maybe house, and maybe family, everything. You realize everything is a more cause of unsatisfactoriness than anything. You have very good reason to become a renunciate. Like Prince Siddhartha, he was wealthy, he had a family, he had support, he was prestige, he has position, he had everything, and he did renounce all. He did dwell under a tree. And he gained enlightenment under a tree. He passed under a tree. So all these 12 Dutta gunas I listed are not non-factual. Buddha actually did all that himself. The thing is, the Buddha is so rare. And one who follow him as a fully ordained monk, nun, is that much rare. Because of that, we should honor those who live, even a small part of that, and not lament the fewness of them, but still rejoice the fact that because they're few, they are rare. And they will become rarer. That's why Dharma is precious, Sangha is precious. If everyone, if the thousands of people who are all monastics were living ascetics like this, it wouldn't be true, you know. There will be many types. In the ocean, there are so many types of sea creatures. Even among monastics, there will be many. Some that wouldn't have a clue whether they are monk or nun. You know, they've been lifting the bucket every day and serving the tea. Yeah, you know, that's all they were told to do. Their job is, you know, they get fed, they get clothed, but they have to lift the bucket that's almost as big as them, and carry the kettle and serve 4,000 people with 12 others. 3-4 times a day. They haven't got a clue that they become monastic. And if they get a nice couple of gifts, as lollies and good foods every now and then, some gifts, and they feel happy because they don't get that at home. And they have free education. And actually, the boys are really well treated. And the monks are, elder monks who are in their 30s, 40s, they're totally dedicated for the future of these boys' life. Whether they say they're not interested, even they don't stay as a monk. But they know for sure, even if they lived 1 year or a couple of months in the monastery, it still will influence them in a way that they had never imagined. And this kind of vision was once upon a time spoken by His Holiness Penno Rinpoche in South India, because he was recruiting so many Nepalese boys and from thousands of miles, and they were saying, why Rinpoche you're breeding all these boys from sort of strange cultures and languages, and very unlikely they will stay as a monk. He says, even if they live in the 1 month time, I still know this will be a good influence to them. And it's incredible visionary. That's exactly what he was. He did that. Now you can see the hundreds of Khenpos graduate from Namdolling. And they're all from Himalayan regions. And how many of them not stayed a monk? We don't mind. They probably are among those people who are sponsoring those big feasts. Exactly. So whole Dharma is supported by that incredible tolerance. No prejudice. Those who disrobe in those traditions, they quickly go and practice and live among the ranks of the lay people and practice them. And whereas some traditions are very, very puritanical. They say, oh, if you stop being monk, then you're a failure, and so on. So in Tibetan Buddhism, there is this kind of two groups, you know. And slowly they will have to learn. If their decreasing number of Sangha is a big kind of concern for them because they're so proud having thousands, wait until next 20 years' time, then they wouldn't have those thousands. They will dwindle into hundreds. Now, then they realize the other groups who are tolerant, as lay practitioners, householders, their number is not dwindling. They're increasing in thousands, actually. And they also read. They also can read the Dharma books. They are literate. They have degrees. They have jobs. But they practice in the temple's monastery periodically, weekly, monthly, annually. And the rest of the time, they raise kids, family, look after the job. And they work hard. They really give lots of donation for the monasteries. Incredible. You know, the whole dynamic of that is so impressive that you don't need to rely so much called from the sort of benefactors from the West. When you go to Nepal to a Dharma event, you know how generous the local people are. You know, not because they are wealthier, but they are wealthier in heart. They don't think about themselves staying in a hotel, paying $50 a night. They would rather share a room like this with 20 of them, but spend $5,000 for the offerings. Totally different culture. Where did that culture come from? That culture come from this very dynamic Buddhist generosity and not putting emphasis for me, physical comfort for me. They always prioritize how much we can offer lunch for 5,000 monks today. 4 of us, let's do that. They all empty their wallet. They do that. Whereas we, maybe not all of us, in the people in the more kind of first world country, if they go to a country, they go to Nepal, they always want to stay in a comfortable hotel. That's priority number 1. Me, my bed. And that's it, And they're spending thousands just for them to sleep well. So therefore, there's a lot of education to do, to do that. But when it comes to sort of doing a big offerings or something, looks like everybody's very poor. Why? Because they never think about that as a thing. They said, I would never budgeted for that, Oh, I could have saved more before I came, because they never were brought up like that. Their culture is totally like that. So the whole dynamic of Buddhism and lay people and monastic in Tibetan Buddhism in general, and particularly the Nyingma, Kagyu, and Himalayan region of Buddhism is so unique, and overall Tibetan Buddhism is basically influenced by that. Because of that, the overall longevity of the Dharma is guaranteed. Why? Because people on a grassroots level are completely believers, and they're not questioning whether they are whether they are Buddhism with belief or not, type of thing. They're completely Buddhism with belief followers. They have no intention of changing their mind over anything, whatever happens to this or that or whatever issues. Those are just personal, individual cases, but their faith is never going to be wavered by any changes. So when you have that, of course, the devotion to the lay householder lamas incredibly same as someone maybe a pure Vinaya holder monk. Almost they say, so what? They have to know their guru and teacher well enough to respect how much his heart is in the teaching and so on. And so they go by that rather than choosing who's a monk, who's not a monk. That kind of thing is a very... certain Buddhist corners are always focused on that. And that's probably will show itself of its durability or lack of it, because that's how Buddhism was lost in India. The monasticism in India was divided into 18 warring groups, all fighting of how authentically they should follow the words of the text, follow these 12 Dutta Gunas. They basically become Nikayas because all these Nikayas broke up in groups, not agreeing on any of that. Everybody become, we are purer than that, hey, they are not as good as us. And that's how fragmentation caused that. Whereas if you bring the whole Dharma into the very spirit of not discriminating between householders and lay and man and woman and novice and fully ordained, but everybody as equal members of Dharma, it's very important. Wherever there is a hierarchy of man and woman and fully ordained monk or nun, that kind of caste system is quite dangerous. quite dangerous. While we are honoring the senior for their knowledge, for their goodness, for the discipline, of course we should always do that. We always honor our teachers, no matter what his background is. If you went to high school, you say you're a science teacher. You always see you're a science teacher. You will never see him as another ordinary person. When you see him, you always. So that kind of respect will be more important, and so therefore. I'm sure our small audience listening here today and there may not be among those concerned groups, but those other concerned groups I know exist about the decreasing number of Sangha in number. It's not a worry. Things change, and the quality is more important than quantity. Thank you very much. So we will do the dedication of marriage. Yes?
It's Carol here.
Yes, Carol.
I'm really looking forward to Siva and White Tara coming up, because I missed last year. But I thought I'd just tell you and everyone else that in relation to what you were talking today about monks who follow the 12 Dutta Gunas that you were talking about, I stumbled across a really good biography online about the life of Ajahn Chah, who, if people don't know, he was probably Thailand's most renowned and famous forest monk. And he really did live by the 12 Dutta Gunas, as you would know. And it's an incredible biography. I think it's fairly recent, but it's available online. And if anybody's looking for some good holiday reading, I'm only halfway through it, but it's just fascinating. It's called Stillness Flowing. And it's really inspiring because he did live exactly like that. I think it was in the 30s and 40s. And there's not that many books by him because it goes back so far. But this biography is just amazing. Anyway, I just thought I'd tell people if they're looking for some holiday reading.
Oh, thank you, Carol. That's really yes. I'm aware of such practitioners, Ajahn Chah, and forest monks, and cave dwellers in the Himalayas. They're different. That's what I'm saying. We shouldn't worry about their outer form or number, but there are many shining beacon practitioners, like one you mentioned. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Om Badis Mere Me Hovaga Dadiva Me Zage Hom Niz Me Ale Berado Bedrone Ajana Bada Dezinade Herenda Mahayana Jiji Wadeva Merera me begas de la Choda Mahayana Dij Kareja Manju Genuode Azama Trabadra de Lava following Ode Zambo Ajade de Mere Mede Zelembo Digid Tebera Nayadaz Eras Bembo Meding Freely with the Before you disperse, those of you who are here or those who are able to attend, this coming Saturday, isn't it? This coming Saturday, we're having a special blessing of 10,000 miniature stupas called tsatsas. And these tsatsas has been already casted, filled, and and painted, and half of them, 5,000 of them, already been consecrated by His Holiness Sakya Kongma Teacher in Malaysia, and they've been already transported. And yesterday they arrived, and half of them have been filled, and some of them were not filled. And we recently have our community already filled them and then painted them, and now we have visit of His Eminence Namkhe Nyingbo Rinpoche, who is the head of Karchu, Australia, the organization which bought our Viruparity Center. And His Holiness, His Eminence is visiting at the moment, and so we were able to invite him to do the consecration, which will be very good to build our community with the Bhutanese, and they have able to fit his program to come on Saturday 2:30 to do a brief ceremony. So if you're able to be in Canberra, please are in Canberra or able to be present, please, you are all invited. Thank you very much.